Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is bits and pieces, and we continue or we give an update on the Ukrainian strike on New Year's Eve that initially killed about 63 Russian soldiers. Well, the number of casualties has now increased to about 89 soldiers, and it includes the deputy commander of the unit. So as I said in my previous video, it wouldn't be only soldiers, it would be officers as well as NCOs. And this is a major tragedy. I've also warned, or not warned, but I said that a lot of the pro-Russian commentators would find excuses about this incident and will play it down and probably wouldn't accept it for what it is. Now, before I start actually with this, with more information, I just want to clarify a number of things. I understand, I've read a lot of comments after this incident, and mostly of these are the typical pro-Russian commentators, but who are also Russians by nationality. And I can understand that they are patriotic and so on. But I have found through the last 10, 11 months and so on, after I've done my own research, my own reading, with the intention of making videos, that these patriotic feelings clouds these people's judgment. And I'm not going to call names because I said I will not make a video about why I disagree. But I've read the comments as well under these articles and in the article itself. And basically, the usual Russian commentators do try to provide a balanced view. Sometimes opinions, sometimes speculations, but basically in support of the Russian offense. It doesn't mean they are Russians or want to become Russians or want to live in Russia. I don't want to live in Russia. I don't want to become a Russian. I'm living here in South Africa, and effectively I have no skin in the game. I have a biased view, yes, but not as much as the people that are usually have these patriot type of feelings. I am pro-Russian because I believe that the Russian situation and the conflict in Ukraine is on the right side of history, and it is the right thing to do. And I agree with basically what they are doing. It doesn't mean I am a Russian. I am also a supporter of Afghanistan. It doesn't mean I want to be in Afghanistan or I want to be a Taliban. I support the people in Iraq, but I'm not an Iraqian, neither in Libya. I am not want to live in Libya, neither in Syria, neither in Serbia. But I do want to support these people's or these countries' view and narrative because I believe that they have been wrongly done, or I would say treated, and that they're on the right side of history, and that what they are doing is right. So I have seen some comments as well under my videos that now try to play us down as being also pro-Western. No, we are not pro-Western. We don't support that view. We don't support that narrative. And I've never made a video actually on the pro-Western side because 90% of what they are saying, I cannot agree with. I'm a big fan of Putin because I respect the man for what he is. And I've said many times, I'm the biggest fan of Sergei Lavrov. I believe he's one of the best diplomats or foreign ministers you can get. And by the way, he looks like my granddad. But then the point here is that the fact if I criticize the actions and if other pro-Russian commentators criticize the actions of the Russians, doesn't mean we are pro-Western. It's just that we try to see the facts on the ground and accept reality. Because usually what is happening is that the truth is somewhere between what the pro-Russian patriots tell us and what the pro-Western patriots tell us. And that is what we are trying to do. And the truth is what we are trying. And we're providing you an alternative viewpoint. Yes, it is biased, but hopefully it's not as biased as the so-called Russian patriots. So face the facts on the ground. The Elysium withdrawal, and Elysium withdrawal, the Lehman withdrawal, the Kherson withdrawal should be seen for what they were. This tragedy on the New Year's Eve should be seen as it is. It's not another motive. You don't see anything, you should see anything in this type of event. What the Ukrainians have constantly said is that they want to kill Russians. Kill Russians. That is what they wanted to do, and that is what they did on the New Year's Eve. There is some narrative being presented that they want to hasten Russia's offensive. That is before the Russians are prepared. There is no evidence that Putin has ever reacted irrationally or emotionally. They didn't react emotionally when the Kherson Bridge was attacked. The thing was planned before, and it was planned strategy of destroying the Ukrainian electrical infrastructure. But it was limited to military use, not for civilian use. That's not what the Russians did. So they just had a reason now to escalate it. And as have been discussed many times, the Russians escalate in big jumps. And the Americans or NATO do it in a salami slicing, as the Chinese have said. But in any case, then we are in any case again accused of we have no military experience, we have lost nobody. How anybody can make these type of statements or assessment without knowing us or what we have experienced in our lives is nothing more than what the pro-Western people are saying, making wild statements without any evidence to support your narrative. So, if there are any of the viewers that are pro-Russians and are Russian patriots, just remember, you got to think clear about this. Don't be blinded by your patriotic beliefs. There are setbacks, that is usual. Yes, people die in war, that is normal, but not this. This was a failure of the Russian command to protect their soldiers. And in this article, just for the sakes, that the facility was targeted by 6 missile rocket launchers, 4 which penetrated the air defense and hit the building, precisely 1 minute after New Year. So that was timed, it was deliberate. But then the Russian command comes and says, while a fact-finding mission is still investigating the tragic incident, it is already obvious that the main reason for what happened was a turning on and in mass use of mobile phones by personnel, contrary to the ban, within the range of enemy weapons, which was allowed the Ukrainian forces to trace their coordinates. And that was said by the Lieutenant General Sergei Severikov from the main military political directorate of the Russian armed forces. I'm sorry, this is bullshit. This is making an excuse. These troops were having New Year's a party within a town or city, if you want to call it. There are multiple civilian people, and they all have cell phones. And that means that how can the enemy distinguish between military personnel cell phones and civilian cell phones? That would be illogical conclusions. That's number one. And number two is one has to ask yourself, do the Ukrainians even have the electronic warfare capability of pinpointing cell phone signals? Because the Russians do it, yes. And it is a known fact that Ukrainians use cell phone and that the Russians can pick it up and then do artillery bombardment on those locations. That is a well-known fact and has been many times confirmed. But now there is no reverse type of evidence. So this is a pure excuse from the Russian command to downplay and then even blame the soldiers who held the party for their own death. And that's a disgrace in my opinion. It makes the case much more worse. Well, and then there came a short, and the next day came out an article which said that the Russians have destroyed about 4 HIMARS launchers and that they killed more than 200 Ukrainian troops and foreign mercenaries in a missile attack. And that was declaimed by the Russian Defense Ministry. Oh, how did that happen? Why suddenly, after this tragic event, the Russians could pinpoint where are these HIMARS launchers and initiate a missile strike on these units and then destroy 4 missile launchers, and just to make the numbers up, 200 Ukrainian troops and mercenaries. Wow, what an achievement for the Russians. It's again a bullshit story. It's to cover up their own failures. And you've got to face it. It's not pro-Western type of narrative. That is the facts on the ground. So the Russian forces accordingly destroyed several US-supplied rocket launchers and eliminated scores of Ukrainian troops and dozens of foreign fighters in a fresh series of missile strikes. 2 launches were destroyed at the Druzhkovka railway station in the Donetsk People's Republic. The second pair of launches, which were firing at other DPR cities, were located near the Ukrainian-held city of Kramatorsk. But just remember, only 6 missiles were fired at that location, and one single HIMARS launcher has 6 missiles that it can fire. So in effect, what it means is that only one HIMARS launch vehicle fired 6 missiles at the location where these soldiers had their party. So now suddenly destroying 4 of these launchers in one go at 2 different locations doesn't sound like a very credible news item or a source of news. Then in addition, 9 HIMARS rockets were intercepted near the front line in the Lugansk People's Republic. Now that's even somebody else, another place, as well in the Kherson regions to the north of Crimea. So in these other 2 locations, they were also HIMARS launchers, but they were not destroyed, by the way. They were not located. But the ones in the DPR, those were located, because that's where the people die. And typically, pushing up the numbers, the Russian Air Force precision strikes on position of the Foreign Legion fighting for Ukraine near Kramatorsk and Masleyakovka destroyed over 130 foreign mercenaries. And up to 120 Ukrainian soldiers were eliminated at Druzhkovka railway station. That's where they destroyed the first 2. Now this is, again, bullshit stories. It was in order to cover up the Russian command's failure to protect these soldiers. You can see whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. Stare the facts in the eye. Look it into the eye. This is a very poor effort of the Russian command to cover up and to spread propaganda. Because one, why now? Two, why 2 times 2 launchers when only 1 launcher is required to fire 6 HIMARS? Why was it only destroyed in the DPR region, and but not in Lugansk and Kherson area? Why is 200 Ukrainian troops, 130 mercenaries, and then another 120 Ukrainians at the location of the Druska railway station, where these other 2 HIMARS launches was? I'm sorry. I have pointed out many times at these daily reports, the numbers don't make sense, they don't gel, they don't add up. According to that report, Russia has destroyed more than double what the Ukrainian forces had at the beginning of the SMO. But we now, as trying to explain and tell the facts as it has been seen on the ground, are now being blamed as being a fake Russian friends of Russia. No. Got to see it for what it is. And if any of these guys, these patriotic Russians, I'll challenge them. Go write and get the names of all the soldiers that died at that evening. And write to their families and tell them, listen here, shit happens in war. People die. But your sons are not heroes and died for a cause in Russia. Your sons and fathers and brothers died at a party. Go write those letters. Or go see the people, the families. Go tell them the stupid, idiotic type of narrative that you are trying to present. Because you cannot see past the fog of patriotism. It makes you nothing better than the Western people in America. They have limited views, limited knowledge about international things. And don't come and tell me that the Russians know better war and have more experience like in Chechnya and Afghanistan. And no. Didn't we, how many wars did the Americans have in the last 20, 30 years? A lot. A lot of soldiers died, were wounded. The wounding ratio was in Afghanistan, I think in Iraq, was 1 killed for every 10 injured. And why? Because of improvised bombs and other means of maiming people but not killing them in those vehicles. So a lot of American soldiers are actually maimed. And then they have post-traumatic PTSD. Yeah. So the Americans also know what is war. And if you refer back to the Second World War, then you got to do with me. Did I lose families in the Second World War? For sure. But that's more than 70 years ago. Forget about living in the past. You talked about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, sure. I've lost comrades, let me see, 22 years ago. No, 24 years ago. That beats your 7 years. Comrades, which I would have called today as a father, happy to have as sons-in-laws. Good guys. So, get off your horse and see it for what it is. And don't blame us for telling you the truth and the reality. In any case, for me, this is a very tragic event. I actually forgot again what I said this. When I was about in, let me remember, grade 10 about. I loved the books of Sven Hazel. It was books about German soldiers and what they experienced. But the style of writing was very much like Louis L'Amour. You know, Louis L'Amour, the cowboy books, well written, nothing heroism, very real, and so on. And I remember once the main character was retreating from Germany and in the snow, and then he was walking down the street, this road together with his comrades, and then they passed a whole company. The company in South Africa is 100 men. They were all dead, lying next to the road as they were walking, because they were submitted under artillery rocket fire, and they were all airburst, and they died right there where they were walking. And at that age, I still was shocked by this scene that I imagined of 100 men die. Now I'm so much older, and I'm still shocked at what these 90 people that have died, which is only the 90 that we know of. We haven't counted the injured. The people accept it for what it is. People died unnecessary. In any case, that's my story for today. Until next time, cheers.